On this episode, we monologue our dastardly plan to take over the world. Welcome to Save Every Universe. I am a special agent with superhuman abilities who's out to capture Alexia Ashford and extract the only remaining sample of the virus from her body.
My name is Robbie. I'm the greatest soldier of all time who has fallen into madness and will now use Meteor to tear open the planet, absorb the life stream, and become a god.
On today's episode, we are welcoming back to the show Jimmy, who you may remember from our VR episode or our Raging in Games episode. Jimmy, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Jimmy. I am a former Black Ops agent who is now hunting down his ex-comrades for vengeance.
And Robbie, who were you last week?
Last week I was Nemesis from Resident Evil Nemesis.
That was a good one. And on our last episode, if you missed it, we talked about horror games. And I was Sebastian Castellanos from The Evil Within, which I was too scared to even finish that game. It got very scary very quickly.
Too spooky.
Yeah. So
and Tony was on that episode as well.
And we had a special guest last time, and he was
Jason.
Oh, yeah, from Friday the 13th, which is a really cool game. I haven't gotten the chance to play it, but it looks like I've been watching a lot of YouTube Let's Play kind of stuff. It looks awesome. Yeah. Today we are talking about the best villains of all time in video games, what makes a good villain in a video game. What have you on the docket today, Robbie?
I thought we could kind of discuss just why we what we think villains are, kind of discuss how we think they're well executed and maybe poorly executed in games.
Yeah.
And why that is. And Jimmy, who likes a good villain, I thought would be a good person to bring.
Yeah, and he actually brought this idea to us for an episode. So, Jimmy, do you have any opening thoughts?
I do. To me, a good villain makes you question if they're evil. I think, a good villain, you see this a lot more, unfortunately, in movies and kind of pop culture than video games, but it's moving to where they have a lot of depth. They have a kind of relatable reason for why they're doing what they're doing. They're not just killing to kill. They're not just hurting to hurt.
They believe that they're doing the right thing in their mind.
And maybe they're doing it ruthlessly.
Yeah.
But I think it kind of goes back to, history is written by the victors.
Right.
Like, you've seen it a lot in real life. China was a warring state for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Until it was unified ruthlessly by one guy, who really dominated. I mean, he was very violent. Was that evil, what he did? Because he slaughtered on a massive level. Well, he had an end game for that.
Sometimes they even have a good motivation. They want to accomplish something good,
but
then how they execute it or how they go about achieving that is misguided, or it's sort of that the means to an end.
Right.
Or
maybe even
kind of
along
thing.
The way, something happened that kind of twisted.
And that's a villain. That's a villain with good depth, where there's complexity there.
Right.
And I feel like you said, there's a lot of video game villains that end up being a little bit two dimensional or one dimensional, where it's just like, I'm a bad guy, I'm doing bad things, I'm going to take over the world, and there's not much thought or anything that goes into it beyond that. So, what are our favorite villains of all time, and maybe a little bit why? Robbie, what do you have?
So I think it's appropriate to open maybe with a quote by the wise Harvey Dent from The Dark Knight. You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become a villain.
Right.
It's an interesting idea. I think my two favorite villain types are either one where it's like they're borderline an anti-hero, like what you're saying, kind of, Jim. Somebody like Magneto, who you're like, well, he's trying to unify people.
Right.
Illidan is another good example.
You
have Illidan on there.
Yeah.
Illidan's a good example from the Warcraft games, where he kind of sells his soul to the devil, but he's trying to save his people, and I think he even succeeds in it.
He does,
but he's condemned for walking that path.
Right.
Or the Elusive Man and Saren from Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 1.
Yeah, that was on a lot of top villain lists.
A lot of people describe the Elusive Man as the best and worst of humanity.
Yeah,
right.
I thought that was a good.
And he was really trying to save humanity, and then kind of got indoctrinated along the way.
Right.
And Saren in Mass Effect 1 is the same thing. He's like the galactic hero who suddenly goes too far. So I either want a villain like that, or I want a villain who scares the shit out of me because they're so foreign, either whether it's not necessarily alien, like Alien from Aliens versus Predators, where it's just so savage and my brain can't go there, but even a coherent and intelligent villain but still so far out, like Sephiroth or the Joker. They're so far gone.
Which is a little bit more on that horror side of things, where it's so alien and so unknown that's what makes it scary. That's a little bit more like a horror character, sort of.
Yeah, to see something so just willing to remove the empathy. Why can't I think of psychopath?
Sociopath?
Sociopath. Yeah. Sociopath. Just somebody who's
where they've lost all empathy for their fellow humans and that kind of thing.
And that can be just as scary,
right?
Because you're not looking at that dark reflection in yourself, but you're afraid that you may encounter something.
In Half-Life 2, you have the G-Man, where you're not really sure what his motivations are, and he just kind of shows up and does dark stuff.
Right.
And he's mostly a villain. But then you also, in Half-Life 2, you have Dr. Breen, who was a man put in a hard situation, and he ends up selling out to the Combine and all that kind of stuff. And so you ended up getting both kinds of villains, I think, in Half-Life 2. And you get a mix of both of what you're talking about, I think.
I think so. What are some of your favorite villains, Jimmy?
Arthas Menethil.
Yeah.
To get super nerdy.
Also from Warcraft.
Who is really more known as the Lich King. But plague arises in his kingdom. It's turning everyone into zombies, and he's a paladin. He's trying to stop it with his mentor, Uther.
Yep.
Right. Uther. It's not working. Like, their holy light it's just not cutting it. And you reach a point where there's a city, Stratholme. There's a breakout. There's a zombie breakout, and Uther is like, let's quarantine the city and figure this out. And Arthas is like, no, we have to kill everyone, or it's going to spread. And Uther's like, no, you can't do that. There has to be a better way. And Arthas is like, if we don't do this right now, the whole kingdom is dead.
Right. It's in Warcraft 3, and it's it's a great example of that turning point. That
when he's
that
like,
moment,
I'm going to be ruthless for the betterment
of,
and honestly, he's right.
Yeah,
you can't really quarantine an outbreak like that.
Well, at least in this,
with what they had,
we're not recommending that if
there's a fire, kill everyone. No, and it's very relatable. And like you said, he kills Kel'Thuzad, who's spreading the plague, but the plague at that point is self-sustaining. So then he goes and gets this ancient demon cursed sword, Frostmourne, to kill Mal'Ganis, who's the demon doing all this. But when he does that, he loses his soul to the sword.
Gotcha.
Well, and in the process, you can see him slipping, right?
He does,
sacrifices the dwarf, his friend.
Right.
He turns his back on his
Jaina, his girlfriend.
Yeah, so it's like it's a great example of watching a hero fall.
Right.
Where he starts out as this paragon,
and he has noble reasons, and he is being ruthless, and you're like, what a dick, what an asshole. But when you put yourself in his shoes, there really isn't a choice. Now, he does turn into a villain and pretty much go back and kill most of the towns that he was trying to save.
Right.
But they would have fallen anyway if he hadn't did what he did.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Ultimately, he is really kind of a bad guy, but I wouldn't say he's a villain just for doing what needed to be done when no one else would.
To quote Wreck-It Ralph, you're a bad guy. That doesn't mean you're a bad guy.
Exactly.
So I would disagree with you in Arthas just because I'm not a big believer in the ends justify the means. But I think it is a great example of, you're like, well, what's the right call here? And if you were in his shoes, what would you do? Is the other choice, going to succeed either? So, and that's Warcraft 3 and then the expansion Frozen Throne. But it is a really good example of that kind of makes you feel queasy.
And having that moment of doubt that maybe this guy isn't such a bad guy. I think if you take, whether you believe in the Bible or not, there's like these archetypes where the devil is the great deceiver, and that there are moments of doubt where you think, okay, maybe this is a pretty good deal. Maybe I should eat the apple. Maybe I, God isn't promising me the right thing here and stuff. So I think all of that reflects out into how stories are told. A game like The Last of Us, I think that's why David, the cannibal guy that you meet about halfway through, was such a good character, because you got to see this other side where Joel, the main character that you've been playing as, and you're killing all these people along the way to survive, were his men. And you get to see his side of it, where you're this psychopath on the warpath who's been killing all of his men, and now he wants revenge. And you're like, okay, I can kind of see his side of it. I've killed a lot of people up to this point in the game. And they did a really nice job with, he's clearly an evil person. He's a cannibal. He's clearly a villain. They do enough there where you feel a little bit of empathy and you see his side of things, and you fall into his shoes a little bit, which is really cool. And I think, like Jimmy, you said, like, that's having that multi-dimensional aspect of it is what makes a good villain.
Because, I mean, it's really shades of gray.
So before, I was going to wait to ask you this question, but since you brought it up, who is the villain in Last of Us? I'm assuming most people have at least heard of it. It's a post-apocalyptic game. You play as a character named Joel who loses his daughter in the first 10 minutes of the game, and then is trying to save this young girl and get her to a place where she could possibly cure the disease.
Yeah.
So who in this game, who do you think is the villain? Because the cannibal character you mentioned, while is obviously a villain, he's not the villain of the game. He only takes up like a quarter of it.
Right. No, and I think he serves more to push Ellie's character arc forward of molding her into a strengthened survivor in her own right without Joel.
Yeah.
So I don't think he is a villain, but he is not the villain. And I think that's part of the brilliance of... Because in a way, I mean, you could argue that Joel's the villain, right? That he does the ultimate evil thing at the end of it. But you're so invested in Joel and Ellie as characters. I think that by the end of it, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but the leader of the Fireflies, spoiler alert, it's been a while. You
should have played it by now.
Yeah.
You have a chance.
But the leader of the Fireflies that you kill to save Ellie is the villain, because Joel's primary thing is to save and protect and love Ellie.
But what's
even though he does the wrong thing, he did what his character arc was supposed to do.
But what about Ellie's character arc? He ultimately thwarts her purpose.
Yeah.
So if you think of her as the protagonist...
So if we were diving deep into it, she's not, though. Joel is really who the story's about, and Ellie forces him to character arc. If we really wanted to get, I have a master's degree in screenwriting, so
this is good. This is good.
So if you were to take Joel as the protagonist, the person who's most antagonistic to that is the leader of the Fireflies, who wants to kill Ellie to save the human race.
Right. Which I guess now that you put it that way, it sounds almost like what we were saying, where she was trying to do. She had a noble purpose.
If you do choose, because you get a choice to sacrifice or save her at the end.
Well,
do you know?
I think even in
it doesn't let you.
You have to kill like the medical staff and go forward. You don't really, as the player, you don't really get a choice.
I was like, fuck that. The whole world can burn. I'm saving my
Which
daughter.
I did too. Yeah. I did too.
So even though it's not like you can argue whether it's ethical or morally correct, the person who's most antagonistic to Joel's purpose is the leader of the Fireflies, who wants to kill Ellie to save the human race. So technically, and I think that's what's cool about The Last of Us, is that's what makes it such a rich, complex story.
Absolutely.
Is you feel conflicted about it, but she's the antagonist to the protagonist.
That's a good
point. Well, because really, to me, the villain was almost everyone. Anyone who wasn't helping you, which was 85% of the game.
Yeah.
Right, but I feel like that's the setting. I actually had this debate with Tony. I feel like that's more of the setting, though I don't disagree with you, and it is trying to thwart you.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I guess a setting that's, I guess, a good follow-up question. Can a setting be the villain?
I mean, I think it can, but I think it doesn't really work in storytelling. I think you have to put a specific face to the thing. Yeah, absolutely. When we talked about it in our genre episode with post-apocalyptic, that setting tends to like squish all that good character juice out of them, like having that crushing doomsday environment around them, but you still need a specific antagonist, which is why The Walking Dead has the governor, which is why they have Negan.
That was the other thing I was going to ask. Do you guys think zombie games are good at that because they kind of force that out? Even though or do you think the whole world can be the villain?
I think it can to a point. Like the stuff with the Fireflies, is that what they're called in Last of Us? That doesn't, I don't remember that being prominent until like the last quarter of the game. I mean, you're trying to
introduce
find his brother,
it early on,
but they mention it, but it's kind of a shadowy background that you're like, I don't give a fuck. Like, and it was still...
Well, you're setting out to go like take Ellie to the leader of the Fireflies.
To me, that wasn't the driving point of the game. It was just getting there and surviving, and that was enough to a point. I think it can be to a point, but if you do go long enough without having a figurehead...
Oh, and you needed that antagonist at the end to face off against with The Last of Us, to make that final choice and vanquish that final enemy.
And
like,
there was
a lot of that still had to apply.
There was a zombie game, I can't remember, it wasn't Dead Island, it was something Dawn...
Dying Light?
Dying Light.
Dying Light and Dead Island both had sort of an antagonist that you moved
eventually.
Forward. Yeah.
And that was actually, I did beat Dead Island, I didn't beat Dying Light, because I put about, 8 or 10 hours into it, and there was still no antagonist, and I got bored.
Yeah.
The gameplay was fun, but it honestly just became, fetch this, hide at night, fetch this, hide at night.
Yeah.
And the fact that there wasn't a face on the evil that I was facing it kind of crumbled it.
See, and I think that's a key. You still need a really great villain of some sort at the end of it. You need a specific face.
You have to have a shadow
person to put.
When even though Man versus Nature is a compelling story, it can get it can get tiring.
Yeah.
It can get a little exhausted from just being like always struggling to survive.
Yeah, like I mean, and it makes sense in small doses and for a while, but I don't think it can carry a story by itself.
So, do you think the best villains are like a perfect mirror point to a hero, or do you think it doesn't necessarily need to be that restrictive?
I don't think so. I think, because like you were saying, the anti-hero I champion that hero. I love Arthas. I love Vegeta.
Well, Arthas transitions, I would say, from anti-hero to villain.
I think that's what makes a good villain. It doesn't necessarily have to be the
Although there are good
version
examples of that, like Batman and Joker. Like the Joker is the ultimate perfect antagonist to Batman because they're polar opposites. Batman is a symbol of like, you know, order and doing the right thing, and the Joker is absolute chaos, which is a nice polar opposite.
It is, and that Jones is really well. Yeah. But to me, if that was his only villain, it would get stale because, and this is just for me personally, if the villain doesn't have that depth that you can relate to,
right,
it's like, okay, well, good triumphs again. This guy is clearly evil. Right. There's no morality here that makes you question, did you do the right thing by stopping this guy?
Right.
You know? And to me, that's needed at some point, and which is why Batman, like Red Hood, he has villains who are, Joker kills, he's a mass murderer. I mean, straight up, you're like, obviously he should be stopped.
Right.
But a good villain to me, towards the end, especially with the development and stuff, you should question, like, should you stop this guy? Is this the right thing to do?
Right.
Or are you going to do more evil in the long run by not letting him do what he's trying to do?
Right.
So, what do you guys think about when you're playing, like when you play multiplayer games like Destiny, PvP, or Call of Duty, or Smash Brothers? What do you guys think of items or classes as villains? So I know, like, Jimmy and I played competitive World of Warcraft PvP, and like Frost Mage,
right.
we said it like a swear word. It was like, another Frost Mage. Like, there was something about that archetype that made me cringe.
Right.
It was the villain to me as the player.
Yeah.
Even though it was a real human being, and it wasn't a villain in your traditional sense. Like, it was straight up like caused me rage, thwarted me at every turn.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Or in Smash Brothers, the bomb that falls at the worst time, or why do we even have these on?
Yeah. So I don't know if that's like a villain, like in a character structure sort of way, but it could be like a nemesis for sure, where it's like the bane of your existence kind of thing.
To me, it's if you use those things, if you play those things, you're a villain. They're kind of like, they're villainous tools. They're shortcuts that are low morality. They are like beating up children in an elementary school and bragging that you just...
So, but like sometimes it's different though for different people who play different ways, right? Like if like Destiny, like if you if I play a Warlock, the things that make me mad aren't the same things that make you guys mad as Titans, and so maybe in that way there is something to that, right?
Mad.
They're sort of opposites.
Is your nemesis.
It's like that's cold. Dude.
I'm just kidding.
That's cold.
Okay, but no, you would agree with like anybody who plays like especially in Destiny 1, like a sliding shotgun. We would all agree that's we're like,
they're villains.
F that guy.
So like, what I was going to say is I mean, in that way, sort of, because it's like antagonists, protagonists are opposites, right? So it's like the thing that's most disruptive to the protagonist is what forces them to arc. Right. Like as a player in a PvP situation, the thing that's like most disruptive and like drive you batshit crazy is like kind of a villain, I guess, because it's like the most disruptive of who you are as like the quote protagonist while you're playing.
And in their world,
I could get on board with that.
In their world, you're not the antagonist. They're just running around sliding shotgun everything. They're
not trying to offend you personally. They're just doing what they do.
Yeah, they're a side character.
I can get on board with that being a villain.
They're trying to hurt you. They're also the antagonist.
They're trying to win. They're not like after Ignis Omega.
Oh, they know.
They're not
the handicap though.
Yeah, but they know what they're doing. They're trying to justify their good by well, I'm just trying to get my XP up or whatever. So that sounds like a villain to me.
I can get on board with that argument.
Padding, I got to get my numbers up.
Yeah.
No, that sounds like a villain, dude.
Yeah.
That's about our time, and I do want to wrap this up by asking you why you hate Wario so much.
Wario?
Yeah.
Oh, God, I hate him.
But why?
Because he's so obnoxious. Like, I hate his stupid mouth. Like, his mouth is so big and gross, and he's got... I don't even have straight teeth, but I hate his teeth. Like, his teeth bug me.
This is kind of a weird thing.
His laugh, dude. That laugh is like needles to my soul. Like, it drives me nuts. Like, who does he think he is? And he's like imposing as Mario, a great hero, and he's like walking around in those horrid colors, yellow and purple, and he's sullying Mario's good name.
Dude, I don't think I've heard
this. I hate Wario.
This is interesting.
Yeah.
We went to a video game shop to promote our podcast locally, and we played a Virtual Boy, and they had Wario Land, right? And I was playing it a little bit, and Robbie went off about how much he hates Wario, and that's not something I knew about you, so that little rant was as satisfying as I expected it to be. Jimmy, do you have any final thoughts on us on what makes a good villain? Your final
quick
thoughts?
Shout out to Andrew Ryan. We didn't have time, but from BioShock.
Dude, actually, that was on my end.
He's one of the great...
BioShock did a nice job where like these dudes created this world that's like you don't agree with it, but you can kind of see what they were trying to create.
You do sympathize with him, and you're like, well, it's not really... I mean, it worked for 15 years, dude. That's just quick shout out to him.
You can't shout out to him. He's not alive.
Shout out, what up? Andrew Ryan, my boy.
And while we're giving shout outs, basically every bad guy from Metal Gear Solid 1 was pretty freaking great.
Yeah, the first one, before they get weird with the third and fourth one. And they're like, I'm part of your army.
Metal Gear, like, they all had like kind of backstories and stuff, though. Just really good villains. That was like a top shelf level villain creation.
It was,
like multiple times throughout.
Yeah, good writing, for sure.
Thank you for listening to Save Every Universe. If you enjoyed this episode, please go listen to every other episode and give us money at patreon.com/SaveEveryUniverse.